Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We've got quite the cocktail of information
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
All about market moves and some pretty big business news.
That's good.
Some emerging trends, of course, as always.
Mm.
Stock tickers, news articles, sneak peeks at IPOs, the whole shebang. But first,
Okay.
let's talk about what happened yesterday. The Dow dropped a pretty hefty 207 points.
Mm-hmm.
S&P 500 and the NASDAQ weren't too far behind either.
Oh, wow.
And futures this morning,
What are we looking at?
down across the board.
Uh-huh.
It's a little ominous. But before we all freak out and sell everything,
Right.
let's try and figure out, what's actually driving all this.
Yeah, what is going on?
I mean, we've got Meta potentially going to antitrust trial, Elon Musk duking it out in the world of AI,
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
and President-elect Trump just announced a pretty surprising new health secretary.
Interesting.
So let's start with Meta.
Okay.
I mean, this antitrust trial is a pretty big deal, right?
It is, yeah. This all started because of their acquisitions of Instagram and WhatsApp. And now a federal judge is letting the FTC's case move forward, which means Meta has to go to court and defend those acquisitions.
So is this like the beginning of the end of Meta's dominance?
It could be. I mean, the FTC is arguing that Meta bought up these companies to squash the competition and basically create a social media monopoly. If the FTC wins this, it could set a precedent for how big tech is regulated globally,
Wow.
which could then impact user experience and the entire online landscape. They could even end up breaking up Meta's empire.
Huh. And I mean, it doesn't end there for Meta, right? Didn't the European Union hit them with a huge fine recently?
Oh, yeah. $840 million to be exact. The EU claims that Meta's marketplace platform was being favored over competitors.
That's a lot of money.
And they're also under scrutiny for lowering ad-free subscription costs in Europe by 40%. Governments around the world seem to be pushing back against big tech's power. These companies are definitely going to have to adapt.
Adapt or die,
Yeah.
right? Right.
Okay, well, Meta's not the only tech giant with problems. Elon Musk is expanding his lawsuit against OpenAI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the artificial intelligence company he co-founded.
Right.
Well, now he's going after Microsoft and Reid Hoffman, too.
What's the reason for that?
Well, he claims there is some unfair competition going on, and that this partnership, they have actually hindered his own AI venture, XAI.
Huh. This is about way more than just some personal feud, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, this case could determine the future of AI. Are we going to let this technology be controlled by just a few big players? Or will there be a more open approach? This has implications for innovation ethics. Who benefits from all this?
So many questions.
It's a big deal.
Absolutely. Okay, so this next story really caught my attention. So vaccine stocks like Novavax, Moderna, BioNTech, Pfizer, even GSK, they all plummeted after President-elect Trump's pick for health secretary. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.,
Wow.
a known vaccine skeptic. This is huge. It's really sent shockwaves through the healthcare world. Kennedy's views on vaccines are controversial, to say the least, and his appointment is definitely causing some anxiety. Will there be changes to vaccine policies? How will funding for vaccine research be impacted? So many questions.
Definitely. And while we're on healthcare, Eli Lilly, a major pharmaceutical company, well, they're suing a U.S. health agency. It's over these drug rebate regulations. And Johnson & Johnson actually filed a similar lawsuit recently. Can you break this down for us? What are these regulations and why is everyone so upset?
So basically, these regulations are meant to control drug prices. They do it by requiring companies to give rebates to hospitals and insurance companies.
Right.
But these companies like Eli Lilly and Johnson & Johnson, they're claiming that these rules are way too burdensome and that they actually end up hurting patients by limiting their access to important medications.
Oh, wow.
It's about the bigger picture of healthcare affordability. Who pays for it all?
And this could potentially have huge consequences for the pharmaceutical world, right?
Absolutely. And for patients, too, of course. These lawsuits could change how drug prices are negotiated and regulated, which could then impact what people pay for their medications.
Okay, let's switch gears for a bit. We've got some big business moves to talk about.
All right, love it.
First up, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. They just got a $6.6 billion grant to build chip factories in Arizona.
Wow.
This is a big win for U.S. manufacturing.
Absolutely, especially with that global chip shortage we've been dealing with. But it's also interesting from a geopolitical standpoint. Tensions with China are rising, and the U.S. clearly wants to be less reliant on foreign chip makers.
So TSMC is a big get.
Definitely.
Okay, next up we have Boeing. They just poached a top executive from Northrop Grumman, trying to revamp their struggling defense unit.
What's the thinking there?
Well, their defense unit has been taking a beating lately. facing billions of dollars in losses on Pentagon contracts. So they're bringing in this seasoned executive from their competition, hoping he can turn things around.
It's a risky move.
High stakes for sure.
Very high stakes.
Now here's something that raised a few eyebrows. Samsung Electronics just announced a $7.2 billion share buyback. And this comes right after their shares hit 4-year lows.
Interesting.
What does this tell us about their strategy?
Well, share buybacks can be a bit of a mixed bag. Companies usually use them to show confidence in their own stock, boost share prices and reward investors. But some people think they're more focused on short-term gains rather than long-term investments. In Samsung's case, this could be them trying to reassure investors, let them know that they think their stock is actually undervalued. But only time will tell if it's actually a sign of strength or desperation.
Okay, and lastly, we've got a billionaire shaking things up in the casino world. Tillman Fertitta, the CEO of Landry's, just became the biggest individual shareholder in Wynn Resorts. He actually surpassed the co-founder Elaine Wynn.
No way.
Yeah.
What's his game plan?
That's the million-dollar question. Tillman Fertitta is known for being aggressive, so he's probably not just going to sit back and watch. He's going to try to influence Wynn Resorts' strategy and operations.
Makes sense.
It could change the casino world as we know it.
Yeah.
All right, let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger economic picture.
Okay.
It's a bit shaky, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's like a giant chessboard with so many moving pieces, trying to figure out what's going to happen next.
So Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell recently hinted that he's going to be cautious with interest rates. Is that good news or bad news?
Well, it's kind of both. On the one hand, it means the economy's strong enough to handle higher rates, but it also means they're worried about inflation.
Okay.
And remember those retail sales figures we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
That tiny increase could actually be hiding some weakness in consumer spending.
Like that less than stellar 0.1% figure when you take out auto sales.
Exactly. It could mean people are starting to tighten their belts, which could then affect the entire economy.
Not good. What about export and import prices? Any hope of inflation easing up?
Sadly, no. Both went up a little bit in October. The Federal Reserve is not going to be happy about that.
Uh-oh.
Because it means inflation is still a problem, even with those recent interest rate hikes.
All right, let's see if manufacturing can give us some good news.
Fingers crossed.
The NY Empire State Manufacturing Index. It tracks manufacturing activity in the New York area. Well, it just came in below expectations. Looks like the manufacturing sector is still struggling. So what does all of this mean for the average investor?
I'd say the main takeaway is that the economic outlook is still uncertain. There's a lot of push and pull going on. It's too soon to say which way things will go.
So what should we do?
Be careful and keep a close eye on those economic indicators.
Solid advice.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dig into some of these economic indicators, see what kind of story they're telling.
All right, lay it on me.
Well, remember those retail sales figures we talked about?
Yeah.
That small increase might actually be a bit deceiving. Like it might be hiding some underlying weakness in consumer spending.
Right. You mean like how it was only 0.1% when you took out autos?
Exactly. Like maybe consumers are starting to tighten their belts a bit, which could have ripple effects throughout the whole economy.
So
Yeah.
not great. Okay, what about export and import prices? Are we going to get any relief from inflation anytime soon?
Well, unfortunately, both export and import prices actually went up a little in October.
Really?
Yeah.
So inflation's not letting up,
Not really. The Fed's probably not going to be thrilled about that.
especially after those interest rate hikes.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's see if manufacturing can give us some good news.
Let's hope so.
So the NY Empire State Manufacturing Index,
Okay.
it tracks manufacturing activity in the New York region. Well, it fell short of expectations.
Interesting.
So it seems like manufacturing, which has been struggling, is still facing some serious headwinds.
It is.
So taking all of this into account, what's the takeaway for your average investor?
I think the main takeaway is that the economic outlook is still really uncertain.
Yeah.
There are forces pushing and pulling in different directions. It's too early to tell what's going to happen.
So basically proceed with caution.
Yes.
Keep an eye on those indicators.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears and look at corporate earnings. Some big companies like Alibaba, Applied Materials, and Aegon have reported this week.
Give us the rundown. Who's doing well and who's falling behind?
Okay, well, starting with Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant. They actually beat revenue estimates,
Oh, wow.
but they missed on earnings per share. So it seems like their business is still growing, but maybe they're having some issues with profitability.
Interesting. Okay, what about Applied Materials? How did the semiconductor equipment supplier do?
Applied Materials had a great quarter. They beat both revenue and earnings expectations.
That's good.
It's a positive sign for the semiconductor industry overall, especially with all the supply chain issues and high demand we've been seeing.
So good news for the tech sector.
It seems so.
What about Aegon, the Dutch insurer?
Aegon also exceeded expectations. They did really well on something called operating capital generation, and they even raised their guidance for the whole year. Plus, they announced a share buyback program, which usually means they're feeling good about the future.
That's great to hear. Speaking of earnings, we have a lot to look forward to next week. Walmart, Lowe's, Medtronic, NVIDIA, Target, Snowflake, Intuit, and tons more are releasing their results.
It's going to be a busy week.
A lot for investors to digest.
Definitely. I mean, these reports give us a real glimpse into how different sectors are doing, from retail and healthcare to tech and finance. It'll be interesting to see who can meet or even beat expectations in this current economy.
A crucial week for anyone following the markets. By the way, we have a list of confirmed IPOs and upcoming earnings reports in the show notes.
Great. It's important to stay up to date, especially in today's market. Speaking of IPOs, one to keep an eye on is Horizon Space Acquisition 2 Corp.
Oh yeah, a SPAC. Special Purpose Acquisition Company. They've been all the rage lately.
Mhm.
Can you remind us what makes SPACs unique?
Sure. They offer companies a faster and often easier way to go public compared to a traditional IPO. They've gotten super popular recently, but some have done really well while others have tanked. It'll be interesting to see how this one performs.
Definitely. Okay, let's talk about electric vehicles for a minute. It's a sector that's been through a lot lately. And now President-elect Trump's announcement to get rid of the $7,500 EV tax credit. That's a big deal, right?
It is. This tax credit was a huge incentive for people to buy EVs. It was helping to speed up the transition to cleaner transportation.
So why would President-elect Trump want to eliminate it?
Well, he's been skeptical of climate change, and his policies generally favor the fossil fuel industry.
Wow.
Getting rid of this tax credit aligns with that agenda. But some people think it'll slow down EV adoption and even hurt American automakers in the global market.
That makes sense. So how did the market react to this? Were EV investors panicking?
It's been a mixed bag. Tesla's stock dipped a bit after the announcement, but Rivian's dropped even more. It's important to remember, though, that Tesla has criticized this tax credit before. They argued that it actually favored their competitors like General Motors.
Huh, I didn't know that.
So their stock decline might be more about the overall market trends.
It's complicated.
It is.
So what should EV investors be focusing on now?
I'd say they should focus on the long-term fundamentals. Things like advancements in battery tech, the expansion of charging infrastructure, and government policies beyond just this tax credit. The shift to electric vehicles is a global movement. It's unlikely to be derailed by one policy change, even in a big market like the U.S.
That's good to hear. Okay, and while we're talking about the automotive industry, let's not forget about those traditional automakers. They're trying to adapt to this EV revolution too.
Right.
Ford and General Motors have both been investing heavily in electric vehicles,
They have.
but they're running into some roadblocks.
Yeah, like any new technology, there are challenges.
Like Ford was recently hit with a pretty big fine from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Yeah.
It was for delays in recalling vehicles with faulty rear-view cameras.
Right. That just goes to show that safety has to be the top priority. Especially as vehicles get more and more complex, automakers need to be proactive. They need to identify and fix safety problems quickly. That's the only way they'll maintain consumer trust and avoid these huge recalls.
It's about striking a balance.
Exactly, between innovation and responsibility.
Didn't General Motors self-driving unit crews get fined too?
Yeah, they got in trouble for giving inaccurate information about an accident with one of their robo-taxis.
Yikes.
This just highlights how challenging and risky it is to develop and launch self-driving tech,
Transparency and accountability are so important.
especially when it comes to personal safety.
Okay, so let's not forget that the auto industry is also facing economic challenges, just like a lot of other sectors.
Right.
Advance Auto Parts' decision to close over 700 stores after their disappointing earnings. It's a pretty clear sign of that.
It is. It shows that even essential businesses can be vulnerable.
Absolutely.
The auto parts retail sector specifically. They're dealing with online competition, supply chain problems, and changing consumer habits.
It's a tough landscape.
It is.
Okay, let's move on to politics and international affairs.
All right.
There have been some big developments lately. President-elect Trump's cabinet appointments have everyone talking.
Yeah.
His pick for Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.,
Mm,
it's caused a lot of excitement and concern.
right. He's a big advocate for public health, but his views on vaccines are definitely controversial.
I think he's going to face some opposition in the Senate.
Probably. And then there's his choice for Interior Secretary, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. His ties to the fossil fuel industry have people talking.
Some people are praising his business experience. Others are worried about conflicts of interest.
It's a complex situation.
Both appointments will definitely be under scrutiny during the confirmation process.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look overseas now. What happened in Sri Lanka?
Well, the left-wing coalition won their snap election in a landslide, which surprised a lot of people.
It did.
This could really change the country's political landscape and maybe even have a wider impact on the whole region.
Wow.
It just shows how quickly political winds can change. Voters are open to new directions.
Even from unexpected sources.
Exactly.
All right, and before we move on, what about that strange acquisition we talked about earlier, The Onion buying InfoWars?
Oh, yeah. The Onion, that satirical news website, bought InfoWars, the platform known for spreading conspiracy theories under Alex Jones.
I still can't believe it.
They're planning to relaunch it in 2025.
Hmm.
But as a humor platform, they want to try to counteract its past reputation for misinformation.
That's a bold move.
Ooh.
Can satire really change a platform like that?
It's a really interesting experiment. It shows how the lines between news satire and fake news are getting blurred.
It does. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. Market ups and downs, economic indicators, surprising earnings, and shifts in the political landscape.
It's a lot.
The world's changing so fast.
It is. And staying informed is more important than ever.
It can be overwhelming, though.
It can, but by thinking critically and being discerning, we can start to make sense of it all.
Okay, so before we go to the final part of our deep dive, let's take a minute to think about everything we've discussed.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a step back and try to make sense of all this. What are the key takeaways? Are there any big trends we need to be paying attention to?
I mean, it's easy to get caught up in all the headlines and news flashes, but these things have real consequences. The market's shifting, those big political decisions, all the tech disruptions. Like, think about the whole battle over big tech regulation.
Right.
The antitrust trial against Meta, those EU finds the pressure to change how they do business. These aren't just some abstract legal battles.
No, they're not.
This stuff could totally reshape how we interact online.
It could change everything.
Everything, from how we connect with friends and family to how our personal data is being used.
And it goes beyond just Meta, right? I mean, Elon Musk's lawsuit against OpenAI, that raises some pretty serious questions about the future of AI in general.
Absolutely. Who gets to control this super powerful technology? A handful of corporations.
Yeah.
Or will it be something more open and accessible?
We need answers.
We do. The answers will shape everything. Our economy, our society, even the future itself.
We can't wait to have these conversations until it's too late.
Nope.
Okay, well, let's talk about healthcare for a minute. President-elect Trump's pick for Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's already stirring things up.
Oh, yeah.
His views on vaccines are causing quite a bit of controversy, and his appointment could lead to some major changes in vaccination policy, and maybe even how public health is funded.
Right. It's one of those things where some people are thrilled.
Yeah.
And others are deeply concerned.
It really highlights how elections have real-world impacts.
Absolutely. The people we choose to represent us, they have the power to influence things like healthcare.
Now let's zoom out even further. We talked about the global economy. It's giving us mixed signals at best.
Right. There are signs pointing in both directions, which makes it hard to predict what's going to happen.
It's a volatile world.
Very much so. And everything's connected.
What do you mean?
Like, what happens in one country can affect the entire world. A political crisis, a recession, even a big tech breakthrough, it all creates ripples.
So how can we make sense of all this? How can we make good decisions when everything's so uncertain?
You have to think critically. Don't just take in the news passively. Question everything. Look for different points of view. Try to connect the dots. And most importantly, think for yourself.
Think for yourself.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple.
It does, but it's so important these days. There's just so much information coming at us from all sides.
It's easy to get lost in the noise.
Exactly. So think of this deep dive as a starting point, a framework for understanding the major events and trends that are shaping the world. Now it's up to you to keep digging deeper. Explore those ideas and come to your own conclusions.
I love that. We're giving you the tools and the insights, not necessarily the answers. Well, on that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and engaging.
And maybe even a little bit challenging.
As always.
It's good to be challenged every now and then.
So remember, the world is full of incredible stories.
Hidden connections and surprising twists and turns.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.
Because that's how we grow.
And don't forget to check out the show notes for those upcoming IPOs and earnings reports. We've got all the links to the sources we discussed, too.
Great.
Stay curious, stay informed. And we'll catch you on our next deep dive